We are officially recording. Welcome back, everybody. Glad to see James and Travis, my dedicated attenders. I'd be terribly lonely if they didn't show up, and I'd be talking to myself. So glad to have you. What I want to do is, you all can see the screen. This is a poster example of what we're going to be doing, but I want to give you an overview of what we're doing this month. Week 1 and week 2, you're going to be working in something called PictoChart, which may frustrate you because there are a lot of opportunities to design, but it's limited. It's not as limited as you're going to think it is when you first get in there. There's a lot more to it than you realize. However, the point of these assignments is to put you in the designer's chair and make you start designing with a focus on the content and the technical aspects of it, and not so much the bells and whistles and pretties. And the reason for that is everybody goes in to design wanting to do the bells and whistles and the pretties, and they're not doing the rest of it. So we're going to really be focused the next 2 weeks on that. So in your discussion board, you're going to be doing a mind map, which is somewhat limited, but we want it to be that way because I want you to focus on one of the things that you guys have had to do, and we'll have to do a lot this month, is paraphrase or rewrite content so that the audience sees it in a way that they can grasp it fairly quickly, particularly when you're dealing with posters, mind maps, and things like that, without being too wordy and without not having enough. It is an art that you develop. It's an art form of being able to get this content in. So that's what we're going to be doing the next 2 weeks. We're going to be looking at models. This week it's Addie and Sam. Next week it'll be 2 different models, and you'll be doing something very similar. But what you're going to find when you go through this process is you will have designed 1, 2 charts, then revised 1, 2 charts, then designing 1, 2 charts, and then revising 1, 2 charts. So you're going to be doing a lot of work in there and learning as you go, way more about what it looks like. Sorry, let me turn my phone off. Didn't realize it was on. Excuse me. So we're going to take a look at these charts, and I'm going to talk to you about, these are the first iterations of the charts, and I'm going to talk to you about what's not working with them. Because what happens is, again, you're trying to put all these colors together. You're trying to choose fonts, etc. And so what we're going to use tonight for is what not to do, so that you free yourself up to figuring out what to do. Now, and the last 2 weeks is a group project. There will be, I think there's 5 of you this time around. There will be 2 groups. You're going to play the role in this group project of a client and an instructional design team. So the way the process is going to go is you're going to get together with your group in week 3, and you're going to determine who you are and what you do to a fairly detailed extent. And you're going to post that. Toward the end of week 3, we're going to meet and we're going to do an interview session where you, as an instructional design team, will interview the other group as the client. Now, I know it's a little confusing, but this isn't the last time we're going to go through this, okay?
Okay.
And then from that interview, you will design a presentation to them, reiterating what they want from you and showing them what you can do. So you're going to play 2 roles. The group that you, business that you design with your group the first time will be the one requesting the training. So I'll go over that again. I just want you to know, and it's not nearly as confusing as it seems, because the end result is going to be that you will have told an IDT group what you need, and they will then have to present to you, and you will be an IDT group, and the client, the other team, will be telling you what they need, and then you will do a presentation based on that. Again, it's not nearly as complicated as it sounds. It's somewhat time consuming, but because you're a small group, we're going to have a group of 3 and a group of 2. And we will get more into that in our Tuesday meeting, week 3. Okay?
Okay.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
So let's take a look at this chart. All right. Just out of curiosity, tell me, both of you, although James has himself muted, Travis, we'll start with you. What
Okay.
jumps out at you that's not right about this chart?
The first thing I noticed was the drop shadow in white around the title, and I don't know. I mean, some of it might just be my opinion, but I wouldn't have used like the black letters in the black background. It seems like it kind of sinks in to the background.
Good. That would have been the first thing I said, starting at the top, going down. Now, moving down, what are some other issues you see with this?
Um, the bullet lists are they're not really lined up. Oh, they're center aligned, it looks like, instead of left justified. Um,
Just as
yeah,
an
and
audience member, when you look at it,
yeah,
somebody receiving this poster. I mean, you know when you're watching a B movie, a B plus movie, an A minus movie, an A movie. You know when you're watching a quality work and when you see things wrong with something. So you don't know who did this, and I won't tell you who did this. So you can pretty much analyze it as an audience member comfortably, because I'm not really judging you. I'm just curious what you see that doesn't work.
yeah. I would have changed up the color for at least for the fonts. You pick one or the other so it stands out more. And there's too many bubbles, and so it confuses the eye. Like there's colors all over the place, I guess you would say.
Yeah,
So
useless
it's
bubbles, right?
yeah,
What's
yeah,
the point? Why are the bubbles
right,
there? There
right,
has to be a good reason to put something in, and there's not a good reason to have a bunch of blank bubbles.
yeah.
I'll move it up
And
a
there's
picture.
and there isn't changes in the color, so they're all very bright. And even if you were going to do something subtly, maybe something very opaque, kind of sinking into the background, but the contrasts are so extreme between the bright colors and the black background and the text being the same as the background. Yeah.
Good. So one of the things that I would say as the teacher in the class is you've picked text that looks like it came out of a textbook.
Mm,
Why
yeah.
would you do that? So my feedback to this was this text is so small and it is designed as if I'm reading a book. Now, it
hmm
seems to me when you're designing a poster, the whole point of the freedom of being able to design that poster and choose how you're going to do it would be to have it not look like a book. Because if you want them to read a book, give them a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
it's one of those things, you have those useless bubbles there. It's taking up space where you could actually have text and make it bigger and make it more legible.
exactly. And it is just so ordinary to do that. I think it's even Times New Roman. There's so much more opportunity. I don't suggest that you go to the extreme of calligraphy unless it makes sense, right?
hmm
But it shouldn't be just Times New Roman bullets. So we've talked about the colors are kind of too bold, which I agree. But what the person should be conveying is the ADDIE model in a way that also represents the ADDIE model. And so it feels very disconnected here to me.
hmm
You are given some of this. You're given this. You can change the colors. So you're provided with this graphic and you work with it. What
hmm
works in this is the theme stays the same. It feels comfortable. The colors match, you see,
hmm
and I like that. All right, we have a lot of them to look at. What you guys can't see is that over here I have a control panel that I cannot cover up. So that's why the film tends to have this over to the left a little bit. So
Okay.
I can't even grab my slider. So one of the things that you have to add is pros and cons. I suggest that happy face, sad face is kind of your run of the mill not so interesting graphic. And you want to stay away from overused graphics. You want to stay away from overused effects because it simply puts you in the category as someone, if someone sees it all the time, you don't stand out and you need to stand out. And you need to always think about that. It surprises me how many students will grab whatever available effect there is without putting any thought into it. And they end up being the blue car on a freeway full of blue cars. And you guys want to avoid that. You want to be the Ferrari. And you really have to think about how to be that Ferrari, really put a stamp on things so that when you're competing, even if you're in a salaried job with a boss, you still, with the background that you're going to get in this program, you should shine with this thinking process. Certainly both of you are capable of that. Those attending class, they get the compliments because they came to class. All right, so a little take on it. Same person, other model. Stuck with the bubbles, stuck with a similar design, has the shadowing, but the difference is they're using white text instead of black. Still got the useless bubbles. Why are these bubbles here? And still have the Times New Roman bullets. But I think the change in the text is a positive direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the white pops a lot better.
Yeah, it definitely does. The colors are the same, but what you don't have in this one, which eases the eye, is the reds and the blues. Well, almost. We've got a light blue here.
Yeah, I mean that first one, even though there's 5 stages, having 5 distinct colors like that is a lot to process. You'd be better off having shades of the same color or something along those lines, as opposed to 5 really bright, distinct colors like that.
Correct,
Yeah.
or pastels. You'll see an example of pastels in here. So this one, obviously, this is the first iteration. A lot of blank space, a lot of dead space. Bubbles, one of them looks like Mickey Mouse with his head slightly turned. Again, you're providing. Huh?
That's a hidden Mickey in Orlando.
Yeah, I hid Mickey in Orlando. But again, the bullets, the boring bullets. There's no Ferrari in this. Look for the Ferrari. And again, the happy and the sad face with the clouds. Not really exciting. So we're just going to move on down and take a look at some other designs. These are all first iterations. What stands out to you in this?
I actually like the beginnings of it, but it looks like it's kind of half done.
A lot of empty space, right?
Yeah, a lot of empty space. Like they started typing and they started it and almost kind of didn't finish. But the beginnings of the design are pretty nice, actually.
Mm-hmm. James?
Oh yeah, I like the font better on the bullet or the information text that they have. I don't really particularly like the color, the lipstick looking color of the approval button, but the rest of it looks really cool.
Yeah, it stands out. The approval button stands out. It actually does look like a lipstick color. Interesting that you said that. One of the things that I don't like about this is what looks like a very weak text. It seems weak. There's no power in it. It's just kind of thin and reedy, and it doesn't make me want to read it. And really,
it's almost like that's placeholder. Like they started and then I'll come back and finish, but never actually quite got there.
Right. So
some of it runs close to the edge over there on the right.
Yeah. So it's not well balanced here. I mean, it just seems to be stuck in there. So let's look at pros and cons. Kind of boring. One of the things I do like about this is the gradual change in the color from the kind of dark gray, green, gray, silvery, going into kind of a gold. I actually like that. I find that appealing. And I think it would be appealing because it gives it some depth.
I started playing around with that particular template on this site just to see how it would work. And that's the one that I picked because I like the fading of the colors, but I also didn't really go into this type of detail either. So
I did the same thing, Travis.
okay,
I picked the same one.
I like it.
That's funny. Well, I like it too. And again, you are somewhat limited. But one of the things that's happening here is I'm looking at a book again, page 1, page 2. You see?
hmm
It's like we turn the page. It's justified to the left. There's a line here. You can remove that line. I suggest you do it unless you get creative with it. But it's really just, I typed it in, and I didn't really do a lot of work with design. So let's go on. We are going to see, now, when you see Addie Sam, it's the same person designing them. So you see the same kind of reedy, thin text. One of the things that I don't think is a good idea is this little overlap on these corners, but I understand why he did it. But the eye doesn't necessarily like it. It doesn't feel right. It feels like something's wrong. The other thing, you've got iterative in here, bottom justified, so to speak, very thin and reedy. Looks awkward. But the reason they did that is because they were just new with this program, and it fit there. And I don't know if you remember, I tell my class, do not cram the text into a design. Design around the text. So if you have to say iterative, choose the design that's going to fit iterative that works. So again, he used the same thing, and again, we have the book. I need to remember to tell you guys something about the cons. You will see that shortly. All right, so here we go. Another blast of neon. More bullets, but this person attempted to try to put the text in a balanced way. But you will notice that some of the text is bigger than the other text.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got a much bigger font here than you have here. And it doesn't lend to the balance. I'm not sure about this neon green.
Yeah.
Kind of hurts your eyes. But I think you have the same problem with the colors, and a lot of people went to that. And the feedback was try to mute these colors a little bit because that's what stands out. And then you have this black Times New Roman bullets that just aren't grabbing anybody's attention.
Yeah.
This one attempts to balance it. And I have to say, visually, this is much better balanced. It still smacks your eyeballs. But the design, you see they did some work on this line that comes naturally. And I find these boxes interesting. And everybody wants to use green and red. One of the things that I want to point out is colorblind people don't see green and red.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an important point here. All right. So we've seen a little bit of change here. Is this the same? Yes, this is the same person doing this. This one's interesting with the pyramid here in the middle. I think we have a spelling mistake here. I might be wrong. Successive.
Yeah.
S-U-C-C-E-S-S-I-V-E.
Yeah.
Collaborative conversation, preparation. We still have the bullets. We're still seeing the bullets. Although this person is making an attempt to try to change up the font, make it a little bit different. I think for the colors they chose, bolding is interesting, but you have white in the circle and you've got black in here. It lends to kind of chaotic, a little messy. Even though this is very streamlined, it still feels chaotic. And then we have the pros and cons. Again, the thumbs up and thumbs down are so overused. There are other options, and I'll show you a couple of them. You can, class, pay attention, everybody who's not in class, you can import your own graphics into PictoChart. Little heads up there.
Excellent.
Yeah. In fact, you can import anything you want to into here to make it look better. But I still want you to make sure that this content is well written because that's our focus. Now we're getting into a little bit fancier. Now, what doesn't work about this is the background. It's hard to read. The fonts are compressed. The colors don't work well. You've got an overlap here that doesn't work. It feels like it's just not comfortable. And this background really throws the whole thing off. You see that?
The disco ball.
Yeah, it's a disco ball. And here, specify con dash tent and tech dash knowledge. No, sorry. I'm in my feedback mode. Don't do that. Again, that's an example of force fitting the content into the design, which defeats the whole purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pros and cons, there aren't any. So obviously this was the first round. Check the X. Everybody wants to do green and red. Don't do green and red. Colorblind people can't see it. This one's interesting. This has a lot of texture here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's compressed, it's squished, which isn't comfortable in the screen. But I really like the effect. It looks like a letter jacket in a way, like it's sewn on,
Mm-hmm.
like material. But again, this background, this reminds me of, you know, the test you get in the doctor's office where you have to see the red number in the blue background when they're testing for color blindness. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
That's what we're looking at. So I don't want to see an optometrist test on a poster. The other thing is, and I think the texture was a really interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's very zen, but it's very empty. So when you have all this space, and I'm looking at these tiny words, bit of an issue. Again, these are first iterations. This looks off. Again, red and green, cut it out. Because of the trick of the eye, these don't look balanced. Obviously, they're not mirror images, and they probably are balanced. They probably are online, but you notice that this is higher than this.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a little suggestion for you. Changes, you can say changes made immediately.
Or immediate changes.
Immediate changes requires immediate changes. Or immediate changes is a pro. So in order to balance this immediate changes, which thank you for saying that, time consuming, is much better balance. I still want you to stay away from the red and green. All right, we're just going to keep on going through them. So this is some feedback, and I want everybody to see this. This is the kind of feedback I'm looking for. You know, I beat you guys up about the RISE model and the Elevate level and providing ideas. So what this person did was actually do a graphic that says it might look better like this, although I'm not sure that it works at all with the inverted pyramid. It just doesn't balance. Even though these are exactly the reverse, this one looks bigger than this one.
Yeah, it does. That's strange.
That point sits down in the text, whereas it kind of layers over the flat.
Exactly.
The flat bottom.
Yeah. So it's not working design-wise. I mean, there's rules, and you guys are going to be learning a lot about rules. So follow the rules. And one of the rules is you don't overlap in odd ways. Okay. So here's another one. Again, a lot of people have chosen this background. Again, the thumbs up, thumbs down. Like I said, import. Do whatever you have to do to work on this to make it a Ferrari and not a blue Ford Focus on the freeway. So whenever you're designing it, you need to sit back and go, is this a blue Ford Focus or is this a Ferrari? And always strive for that. One of the things, and this I believe is the next one, where a con is that it doesn't work for large groups. But a lot of people put con works in small groups. Well, that's not a con, that it works in small groups. The con is it doesn't work in big groups. So you got to be careful what you're saying here. And I can't tell you how many people said that, works in small groups. That doesn't sound like a con to me. Sounds like it's great. It works in small groups.
Yeah, it's characteristic. It's not a con.
Exactly. A con is it does not work well for large groups. That's a con.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like saying the con you have brown hair. It doesn't really work.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, it would be a con if it was a shoot for a redheaded model.
True.
It's contextual.
It's all about context.
That's right. And this is all about context. So this one, they tried some to be creative with the color of the font. Again, it looks a little thin and reedy. It's also out of balance, although they did work to balance it here. But you can see the attempt at trying to match these up. That wasn't necessarily successful here. I mean, we get the idea, but do we get the idea enough? And I vote that we don't really get the idea enough. We look at it and we're trying to say, why is all this text a different color? Oh, I see, because it kind of sort of matches this color, but it doesn't really. I see what it's trying to do. And I'm not grabbing the big picture of what's this all about. There's too much writing going on here. So we are going to, and again, thumbs up, thumbs down. At least they didn't do red and green, right? So we're going to continue to go down because we're going to end up getting second rounds here shortly. There are 12 people in this class, so there's quite a bit to look at. Now this one, not sure. I believe when I gave my feedback, I said this looks like Da Vinci's
The Vitruvian Man, or however you say that.
Exactly. I knew you'd pull that up for me there. Why is he here? And why do I get the feeling that I want to see his central nervous system and his organs? It represents something that's going to pull. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the model you always see in like the heartburn commercials where they show the medicine going down and working. So pretty sure that is, but hey.
And when I look at it, I actually, and I know this is recording, but I can see him all turned around in all his naked glory. Well, I just don't think that's gathering. That's not pulling from me what this should be pulling from me. It is very clean, but is it too clean? That's one of the decisions you have to make. There's a lot of diagram here, or very little. Kind of large in the whole scheme of things, and this little guy throws the whole scale off. Can you see that? Remember, Travis, when we were looking at your cars and where they were placed? And
yeah.
And by the way, you did a great job moving all that stuff around because I was very comfortable. I did not stress one bit about the cars getting washed away in the surf.
Okay, good.
I was very relieved not to see those wheels in the water. But we got a similar problem here. And by the way, the idea of the people going behind your shoulder was quite cute, and you did resize them appropriately. But we have the same issue here. We got a tiny little man and big giant signs, and it just doesn't feel right to the eye. Now, one of the things he did, here's his pros and cons. He did import this image. He actually designed it himself. What he ended up doing, and I'll show you, and this was the feedback. Here's how class is going to go, is next week when we meet on Tuesday, we're going to look at everybody's posters. And talk about them and how the improvement of the design, etc. But because we're sticking with Tuesday nights, it's kind of hard to look at current postings because they're not due till Wednesday. So what I'd like you to do is bring to the table what you've got for our Tuesday night classes so we can sandbox them and take a look at them and see how they can be improved. One of the things, obviously, the feedback for this was these points should not be stuck in here. It makes me feel like we've got an injury. And so one of the students suggested remove one and just put a single one with the point going down in here in the blank space. And that worked really well, and you'll see it shortly. We'll take a look at this. He did a good job, and he didn't do bullets. They're not bullets, but my audience eye can absorb this very quickly. Oh, it's repetitive, and it's possibility of wasted time or time wasted. Desensitizes too many reviews. Well, the problem is I don't really know what that means exactly. I mean, you can't explain it too much, but can you say desensitizes in a way that tells me what you're talking about? Because I don't really know what you're talking about. So I know that it's pro because apparently using this, you collaborate early and often, but I don't know what communication without process means. What does that mean? Saves time and money. I know what that means. And I would say it's flexible, or I would say flexible as opposed to flexibility. Because flexible tells me that the model itself is a flexible model. Flexibility tells me that I'm not sure what he's talking about. Who has flexibility? I mean, are we talking about the model or are we talking about the people doing the model? You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's where you really have to think about your words. Okay, and the second one was that Sam. I think that was Sam. Yes. Let's see if I was right about the spelling. Yes, I was right about the spelling. I thought there had to be an S in there. So we'll take a look at what he did in his final iteration with the pros and cons. Obviously, he didn't use this one. He used this one. But again, he imported that. Okay, so we've got a very clean design, but there's still too much poster. You see that there's too much poster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This should come all the way across. We should not have all this empty space there. Process training, what worked, what did not. Problem to be solved, define audience, goals and objectives, logistics. So you're going to get all those words. You got to figure out how you can explain to your audience, I don't know what they're talking about. Process. I know what they're talking about, what worked, what did not, because I actually know about the model. But it should say somehow will identify what worked, will identify what didn't. But you have to make those choices in the design. But again, there's just way too much empty space here. Although I do like these.
Mm-hmm.
It's still kind of thin. I mean, look at this, training program deliverables. And there's like nothing there in 2/3 of this. All right. Again, the pros and cons. So now we're going to get into, let's see, we're going to get into some fixes. So we've already seen this. Again, the Etruvian man needs to go away. But he's starting to figure out how this program works. And we've got a little 3D effect here, which frankly I find really nice. You'll also notice that the colors have been muted down a little bit. There's no reds, which I really like. They're still there, but this look, this 3D look is quite pleasant to me. And it's interesting, but one of the things that the feedback said was, it looks like it's becoming diminished in importance.
Mm.
Also, this is the start, and this is the finish. Yet it's designed from the end to the beginning. You see?
Mm-hmm.
The beginning is gather information, have a collaborative conversation, have a savvy start. And then you develop your determination for that, implement it, and evaluate. And you repeat that 3 times in this process. But by choosing this design, it's sending a message that's not particularly correct.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but the overall design is great. And he's still got his 2 cons and pros and cons. So here we go back to bullets, small text, book level text, pros and cons, very boring. Pretty much the same here. So let's go down to look at their second iterations. Now this person, this is Carrie, she went crazy. She did like 9 designs because she wanted to get it perfect. So she's chosen a lot of different things. I thought this was interesting, sunshine and rain. Now that's a little bit different. It's a bit too much, but it's a little different at least. She's trying a different font here. And you notice that all she did was border it with the color, which I thought was an interesting choice. I mean, this certainly needs work, but I thought it was an interesting choice. All right, so this is where, okay, so Brett's showing the work that he's doing on this. No, he was giving her feedback. And again, I really, really want to see this feedback with real ideas, with real links, with real information. And the key is, and this is what people are missing, is it says, feedback to the classmate was reference the reading materials and the tutorials. And I'm not seeing that from people. We really need to do that. When you make a point to somebody, say, do you remember when so-and-so said, or in the text, this text, blah, 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 right? I need to see that. That's the only way I can give a full credit to something, because both you two write very well. But if I'm missing the in-text citation, if I'm missing the reference to the reading materials and the things that we're learning, then I have an element that I can't give points for.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, although an interesting design, obviously the text is a disaster. Right? You can see it's a disaster. It's all over the place. It doesn't have any kind of continuity. It's not consistent at all. And they did do some work on that. But that was what stood out with that one. Again, the thumbs up and the thumbs down. And again, the bullets and the text is chaos. The text is chaos here. And you notice this is compressed.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't do well. All right, let's go to, now this is one interesting that I really love the design here. The only problem that I see with this really is, and I don't even mind the colors in this, is that there was not a good use of space in these book graphics. It's again like reading a book. It's left justified, it's bullets. She did some work on that and it came out fairly well. I believe she ended up taking out the thumbs up and thumbs down and changing the green and red colors. There are too many colors in this, for one thing. I mean, it's just busy, busy, busy. But I understand why people were doing that. But I particularly like the look of this. I like the look of this. I think it's well balanced, although you can see, well, it appears to be a little bit too far to the left. But I think the choice of font is a very good idea. But it's gold, standing out, not matching anything. There's no real continuity to the colors in this. But I do particularly like that design. So here she goes again with the same design. She did some work on it. Let's see where we are. I'm going to move my little control panel to see if we are getting to, we are getting there. We're about halfway through. So I want to see some future iterations. We're going to skip a few because we've beat this to death. And I want to get down to the ones that have been redone. Ooh. That one's all over the place, too. All right, so here we go. Let me bring my control panel back over. So here's Amari's. He's still got the bubbles. Let's see if he's kind of redone this. What he did do was change the size of the font, but the bubbles are still there. The happy face, sad faces are still there. So I'm not sure that he was deeply successful in his reiterations. So this Christopher, he still has similar problems, reedy text here. This is the first assignment, so there's a little bit of room for it, but there's not a lot of change here. I don't see a lot of change. There will be some that you will see. This one changed the lipstick color. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
It still doesn't really go with the overall design, though. And so you have a problem with that. You've got all these colors, which the graphic comes to you with all those colors, but you can change the color. Reedy kind of thin font, text. You know, I interchange words. Text can refer to what's written on the screen, and text can refer to the type of text. So I end up using that word a lot, and I try to replace it with font. This font is thin and reedy. And I'm not crazy about it. And still we have the left justification. Here she worked. Do you see how she did work on the bullets and how much better they look? It's not perfect, but it's much better. They're better balanced in there. This one's just slightly too high. They're all just a little tiny bit too high. But she changed it. She made it bigger. It's much more pleasing to the eye. So I asked her about the picture in the background and what was the point of it. And what she had to say was not a good enough justification to explain why that picture's back there. Because it looks nice is not a good justification. I do like this kind of design, but I just hate those thumbs ups and thumbs down because they are so typical. So the same style again. I'm trying to find one that made, and there's so many of them on here, that made some significant changes. People didn't really get really good at this until the second week. This is, again, I believe a new one. Very book-like. Boring text. The 1, 2, 3s do not work. And now we're going to get into Carrie's and her remake of these. Now, I think she's improved this significantly. She changed the background a little bit. What happened is that the reason that she made these solid is because in the past ones, the lines actually went through and did not work for the text. She's still got some problems here. There's some crowding in here. This is too high. This one's a little bit more balanced. It's kind of busy. It's not jumping out at me. But I think what she has to say, review each stage, determine needed changes, is good. Accessibility, not sure what that means. Deliver training, I get that. Secure resources, I get that. Assessment and feedback, I get. Accessibility, I'm not sure what she's telling me there. During the development stage, I would say design a training program, but she did that to fit the text in the size. Now notice she could have made that bigger. Again, make deliverables. I think it's more like determine deliverables. But her cons are a little bit tidier. So you're seeing that she's making progress in a tidy sense. ×3. Now she's got a nice little concise picture here. The ×3, obviously, that you do it 3 times. Choosing the pyramid shapes really make it difficult for you to get in what you need to get in a way that's comfortable. But I think this is kind of tidy and an interesting choice. And here we go. He made a Truvian man bigger instead of removing. He also changed this. He made this a little bit bigger and less of appearance of going away. But again, I really like the 3D design, and I'll tell you what I really like about this is the colors. They're muted. It's not those bold primary colors. It's much easier on the eye. But the guy has to go because I'm just waiting for him to flip over to the backside, and I get to see him in all his glory, and I want it. So he actually submitted another one where there's only the 1 pros and cons. So I guess I'm just trying to get to that. This one is nice and clean. The text was changed. The font was changed to make it bigger. I like the white. Etruvian man has got to go. But I definitely I know I keep saying that, but the guy irritates me to death. He keeps saying that. I'd like him to just leave. I mean, stick a guy in the middle of a poster, you know?
He's doubling down on that, that's for sure.
I know. Why is he there? Answer me. Why is he there?
He's the same color as the design step, so maybe he's the designer.
I don't know.
The scantily clad designer.
Mm.
You know how people leave a signature, or they leave like a signature mark or design on their work, so maybe that's his.
Yeah, well, he needs to change it.
Yeah.
So I love the 3D effect. It's very pleasing to the eye. The muted primary colors, pleasing to the eye. This arrow being an odd color, not crazy about that. I would suggest that you actually use this color, this kind of baby poop yellow color. All right, enough of that. So, but I really like the effect he's using, that 3D effect. I think it's very pleasing to the eye. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Gives it energy, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I like the second one more so than the first one. The kind of linear one. It gives it kind of a impression of not only that it's got some kind of hierarchy, but it's a linear process versus a iterative one. But it's this one right here is really nice.
Yeah, and part of the reason it's nice is it's not linear. It's a circular kind of process. You go round and round and round. Well, doesn't everything except that guy tell you that that's what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just noticed he's looking off the page too. I didn't even think about that before.
I know. I just expect to see a central nervous system. That is exactly the picture they use in a doctor's office with a central nervous system.
Yeah.
All right, so he still has not put just the 1 pros and cons, and I know he does. So I'd like to find that. So these are further iterations. That's awful. That's just awful. The good and the bad just do not fit the overall design. Not working for me. That was not one of my favorite designs. Okay, so in this attempt, the font has changed, the size has changed, the colors. You can't even really tell that's purple though. So it's a part of the design that just does not work. Still a thumbs up, thumbs down, but you notice it's no longer left justified. It's a relief to not see it left justified. But it's not well placed either. We've got all this space here, little space here. Same with this one. There's less space here than here. Now this one's a little bit more balanced, but it actually appears to have a little less space here than here. So it takes time to place these things. And I still want to know what desensitizes mean. I suppose I could read the book. So that's the second of the design, and these are the second iterations. So they've stuck with the extreme colors, and the problem is, again, the font's still different sizes, and in fact, that looks bolded, and that looks not bold. These actually look like two different fonts.
Mm-hmm.
And you just can't have something like that in the works. This one is off center significantly because I believe they centered it on this instead of here, and here where it should have been centered.
I've noticed a few like that. They seem to be centered on a different item than the center of the page. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're not thinking about it. So the whole thing's thrown off. I mean, you can see here it's not centered. So what's happened is, and I was hoping to find Brett's where he did just the one teeter-totter that he brought in, but that was next week. He ended up doing that the following week using some of the similar graphics. So essentially, we've been talking for 45 minutes reviewing these, and I hope I gave you some really good ideas about going out there and experimenting with different fonts. I mean, how many fonts do you have to choose from? I can't even tell you about them. But do not hesitate to do the designs outside of Pictochart and import them in. You absolutely can do that.
Okay.
We give you graphics to use, but only the basics. You'll get this graphic, but you can actually change the colors in the wheel, so you can work with that too. If you decide to do, for example, silver to a darker green, you pick a color palette and you stick with that. I really want you to pay attention to how you're writing the content so it makes sense. Something like identify timeline, budget, and scope makes sense to me. I know what they're doing during the analyze phase. That makes sense. Identify the audience, identify the problem. Makes perfect sense. In fact, all of it essentially does, but what's the structure? Not sure what they're talking about. So you need to reword it so that I get what you're saying. And that means that if these have to be bigger, they have to be bigger. But you don't want to, you want to be able to say it without for, it's, and, then, thus, that's. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, identify or structure of what? I just want to know what that is. I mean, I know what they're talking about because I know the models. But you don't do posters for people who know the models. You do it for an audience who needs to learn about them. Someone walking into a classroom, someone walking into a boardroom. Think about this as a handout you might give to a group of people who are going to come in and try to apply the model to something. What do they need to know without writing them a book? What can stand out to you that you can absorb it fairly easily and quickly by looking at this one sheet? Okay?
Okay.
All right. That's my part of class. Now I want to open up to any questions that you all may have.
So my question is on the Picto website. So if I were to design them in Illustrator and then I just go to the open template version and upload it to that, is that how you would do it? Or I would turn it in on the FSO platform just as my PNG file from Illustrator?
No, put it into Pictochart. Now, one of the things, I'm glad you said that because one of the things that happens is that they change these beta programs pretty quickly. So one of the things, I think it's next week, you have an assignment where it says you must use this. Well, the assignment has changed and they haven't rewritten it yet. And so my feedback is going to be you choose whatever you want to do this in.
Okay.
But we do want to limit you to Pictochart, but we are not limiting you to what you import into Pictochart.
Okay.
I want you to figure out how to do it. You've got to have this. Is one of the things that you'll get to do in this class is work with like 4 different softwares.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things we want you to do, to know what's out there, know what their limitations are. But for example, Travis, if you're running your own business and you've got 4 levels of employees, because that's who you're going to hire. You're going to hire the guy who can do the basic stuff when your client wants just basic stuff. You're going to hire a guy that has a little bit more knowledge. You're going to hire a guy that has a little bit more, and you're going to hire the guy that can do all the fancy stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when your work is coming in from a client, the client says, I need a series of posters that talk about this. You're going to go, hey, Robert, I want you to get into Pictochart or something else. And you remember the design that we did for the client last month that was using the silvers and the greens? Yeah. Well, that's what I want you to do. Put this content in there using that similar design, because you're not going to pay a highly skilled person to do something doesn't require high levels of skills in programs that cost you a lot of money. Right?
Yeah, I
So,
see. I see your
yeah,
point.
you need to have exposure from 0 to 100. And so you're going to get exposed to some 20, 30 exposure in some, and 60 in another, and 80 in another. So you're going to see these different programs so that you can manage in your head how things should be approached. Now, you may, as you own your own business, do everything in Illustrator. You may decide to do that, but you certainly probably will be for this assignment.
Yeah. What you run into a lot, especially with the government, is they want to maintain their own files. So they'll ask you to create something, but they'll want you to create it in their software so that they can maintain it going forward. So sometimes you're kind of like, sure, we know how to use pictograph, and then you
Exactly.
figure it out as you go. So
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's a smart thing to say whether you know it or not. Oh yeah, we know that. Sure.
yeah,
I know how to
because
do that.
they're all basically the same. You can figure them out, but they want to maintain it going forward. So they want it in a native platform that they can deal with. So you
Oh,
see that.
absolutely. Well, you know, I was 16 years in the Army.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But I got to tell you, my entire career was based on, yeah, I can do that. And then
Sure.
I'd go figure out how to do it in a hot sweat, let me tell you. Scared to death I wouldn't. But I have to say joyously that I never didn't figure it out, and I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that. So that's what I expect from you guys, to never not figure it out. Because it takes courage and it takes guts to be the front runner. And that's what I want you guys to do, is have some courage and some guts. Because the way this class is set up is you turn it in and you get feedback. You can have all the courage and the guts you want at that point. Now, if you don't, implement my feedback, then it's like no more courage, no more guts, do what I tell you to do. But you have an opportunity as you're designing this to take a risk. So I encourage you to do it. I'll give you my feedback and say that doesn't work for this reason. Your classmate will give you feedback. Or we might say, I'm absolutely blown away. What an incredible job. I just want to see Ferraris. But, they didn't make Ferrari perfect the first time. It was kind of just for some reason, DeLorean just popped in my head.
Oh yeah.
My analogies. You guys know me by now, don't you? So take the risk. Do it. It's open for feedback. You know that. You don't get slammed with an F on Thursday morning. It doesn't work that way. So you put it in there. If it's not working, we'll work on it.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. That's all I have for you, but I'm happy to take questions.
Yep.
That's all I can think of for now. Yeah.
Yep. I'm good.
You're good? You guys are always such a pleasure to have in class. You listen so well, you contribute, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
You're
All right.
welcome. So to everyone else, I'm going to stop the recording.